Hey guys, welcome back. Another podcast episode here. This is taken from a recording that we did with Nick Adair from GunDogIt Yourself. We sat down at Pheasant Fest, had a chance to catch up in the Yukonuba booth and talk about a variety of things. Some of it was just very simple, what we were dealing with in that situation, which was large crowds and some new young dogs that I had at the show. And then we got into a little bit of field trialing and a little bit of talking with cover dog stuff with the upcoming spring grouse trial seasons that I was going to be running Makina in. So hope you enjoy. If you haven't already, I would check out GunDogIt Yourself. Really good podcast. We've been on it a few times, but Nick has got some really good guests, and I've gotten a lot myself from listening to it. So I would recommend you check it out. Thanks again, as always, for supporting this podcast. We really appreciate it.
Jeremy Moore, we finally get to meet in person and on the floor of Pheasant Fest at the Yukonuba booth. So far, who's the most popular dog? It seems like it's Makina.
It's a toss-up. Yeah, I think Makina's kind of stealing the show, though. She's she's got the most energy.
Yeah.
So I think she attracts people just with that. And that's something about her personality. She shows really well.
Yeah.
Like she's got a real inviting personality. Where the labs are real beautiful in their way too, but they're so you almost don't notice them.
Right.
Half the time people don't realize they're there, but Makina lets you know she's there.
Yeah.
But all three of those dogs, this is their first show, so
I was about to ask, how often do they actually get to go to shows?
These
and
ones
this much distractions.
Right. These ones we haven't. I mean, we've over the years we've done a lot of shows and we always bring dogs, but first time for them, and I think they handled it really well. I think it was really interesting yesterday because it's a great example for people. Like Makina, I don't know, we started at noon, I guess, and by about 3:30, 4 o'clock, Makina finally laid down, but she stood the whole time, and she was, she can't move anywhere. She's on her bed, but tons of interaction with people, obviously real stimulating environment. And the other dogs were wiped out, sleeping, by 2:33.
Yeah.
By 3:34, she was laying down, and her eyes were closing with her head up. I mean, she was fighting it,
Mm-hmm.
But when it happened, I mentioned it to a couple of people. I said, "Here's the perfect example. If you had, if they were carrying Apple Watches, they had about 50 steps yesterday. They didn't move much, but they were exhausted after riding in a car for, I don't know, a total of probably 12 hours between that, in that 24-hour window. And so they didn't do much physically,
Mm-hmm.
but they were as tired as they would have been if we had hunted all day. And it was all due to that mental stimulation. So my point to some of the folks that were there was, if I can figure out, and we can figure out how to balance our exercise, quote unquote, with both physical and mental stuff, I think you get so much more of it, because I think you gain from the mental part. The physical part, I don't know how much you always gain from. I think I think some people exercise their dogs as a means of wearing them out or giving, letting them, burn energy, which is totally true. It makes sense, but really you're conditioning them. And you're conditioning them to be able to go
building
further.
a bigger gas tank.
Yeah,
really.
you're making them better athletes, and you're making it harder on yourself. It's harder to tire out a dog that's in really, really good shape.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do? Well, you got to run them even
longer.
more. So I think the big takeaway was if you can really work on balancing those two every day with everything you do, between the mind and the feet. I always say, got to have them both. Got to have their heads and you got to have their feet. And you probably don't have to run them nearly as much as some think you do. But yesterday there was no running. It was all mental. And I do think I know they were exhausted.
Well, and I mean, something like this where so many people, I always love seeing people's reaction when they get to see, maybe they haven't seen dogs in this environment. Just chill, just be perfectly content to chill on their place. And it's a testament to where, regardless of breed, I mean, obviously you have your labs here, which I think a lot of people, labs, place training, like you see that a little bit more often, but showing that an English setter in this environment it's the same rules. It's the same concept.
Dog's a dog when it comes to
Yeah.
that stuff. I always say, and I do think, like, I think that's the part that's probably most interesting to this crowd, and it's a bird dog crowd, obviously. So I do think that it's probably the thing that they're surprised at, because you're not going to see. You're not going to see that probably that often, and it's not because they can't do it; it's because people don't do it.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't do it because they don't think they can. And I don't know, if nothing else, I hope people go, boy, maybe you can do that with other dogs,
Absolutely.
other breeds. But
I mean, there's proof right here, proof of concept. It's a testament that you're standing here talking to me. We're doing a podcast while complete strangers are over there petting your dogs, and you're keeping an eye on them. We're not just like turning a complete blind eye to them. Right? They are dogs, and they could just leave the place, but you have confidence. How do you advise people that they come to you? They're like, I want that.
Sure.
How do you start breaking that down for somebody to make sense that your dog can do that?
Really good question, because I've had that conversation a couple times today already. Where just 5 minutes ago, a couple came up and said, "So tell me about this. Tell me more about this." Well, and I do think that place training, that terminology, I would say it's. I mean, I think it's become very, very popular. It's become there's programs built around it, and training theories behind built around this idea. I would say part of the reason why I'm able to do this with them is because I do not do any of that stuff. Like, it is completely different for me. It's not wrong. I'm not saying that stuff is wrong. I've never used a place board in the field. I've never used a place board for steadiness. I've never used a place board for handling with dogs. I've never sent dogs to a place board. I've never casted dogs off of place boards. I've studied it. I've watched videos. Ian Openshaw's videos I've watched. I don't do it. And here's because I want to do this. Okay. So for me, place is very much it's a controlled spot that they won't make a mistake in, and it's really safe for them, and it's very functional for me as a dog owner. In my house, we've got places. Dogs lay on the places. At a show, I've got a place. Dogs laying on the place. So what I think part of the issue that people have is, and it again, I'm not saying this to say it's wrong to do it other ways, but it creates some of the struggles, because what some people are trying to get out of place training is a different end result. You got to always think about, what are you trying to accomplish with it? Well, when you use a place to teach a dog to handle, your goal is to get the dog to handle. Cast to the right, go to the right. Cast to the left, go to the left. Go back, go back. The place is a tool that they're using to get that behavior. I don't want the dog leaving that place, and I don't want the dog going to that place. And I've seen some spots where they really allow the dog to kind of free choice to get onto the place, earn a reward by getting on the place. Well, they hop on the place. Yeah, it's really effective. They're learning to learn, I think, is how a lot of people describe that. But the problem with it for me is, but they jump off right away, and then they jump on again, and then they jump off again, and they jump on. Well, every time they jump on it, we reward them. Every time they jump off of it, what happens for them? They get to jump back on and get a reward. So in order to get another reward, what do they have to do? They got to jump off. So it's a totally different objective that they're trying to accomplish. What my goals are with place training is, go on your place and don't come off. Move around all you want, but don't come off. Mm-hmm. So when I teach a dog to place, whether they're little or old, when they get on there, they don't come off until I initiate them to come off. So like, it's the opposite. I'm not teaching them to go on it. I'll teach them to come off of it when I tell you to come off, and that ends the session. That ends the behavior. So, but if I tell you to go back onto it, that's like a permanent. Yeah. Now you can move, so it's kind of like, it's similar for me to, like, if I teach a dog to sit, they shouldn't move until I ask them to come off of that sit. Well, some will say, well, that's stay. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, it's built into it. Yeah, it's the same thing. The difference for me with like sit and stay is, if I tell a dog to stay, I don't call them off of it. I'm making it very clear this is like a permanent thing. I'm going to come back to you and I'll take you off of stay. If I tell a dog to sit, there's certain points in training where I do have to move a dog. I got to put him somewhere for a while, and then I got to move him, and I don't want to have to go back to him to move him. So for me, if I tell a dog to sit, I'm okay with calling him off. There's some things that when I teach a dog to sit to the whistle, I put the dog on a sit, I might back up from them, call them to me, and then stop them on the whistle. So like it's creating a little bit of distance. They take 2-3 steps and I stop them again and sit. So they have to already understand the concept of sitting, and I do that kind of in a heel position, but I'll call a dog off of that sit in that scenario because my objective is come to me, move again, and then stop at a distance. So I want to try to make it easy for them to understand. So if I'm not telling a dog sit, stay, and then calling them to me and trying to stop my whistle, I'll say sit, back up, call them to me, sit, call them to me, sit. So I make it 2-3 repetitions of take a step, sit, take a step, sit, and it's all stopped on that whistle. But I'm not going to confuse those two. With place is place.
Yeah.
Don't come off that.
And
I never struggle with it.
Right. Well, and
It's
you sent me a video like last year sometime of Makina when you're doing that with her as a puppy.
Yep.
And it's like you described, you're not training place like most people train place. You're not luring, you're not rewarding to jump on, but you're just sitting there. I think you're sitting at the table working, and it's just like, I'm working, and it's like, yeah, I might get to work for 30 seconds to begin with and then correct, or get her back on. But just building that association that like, no, this is safe. The floor is lava. And you weren't being forceful. You weren't essentially like you weren't luring. You weren't trying to what's the word? I can't even think of the word right now. You weren't trying to just get her to do it for the reward. You weren't bribing her. That's
there was no. Yeah, I don't do it with kibble. I'm not. This is not a rewarded. Like
she just gave in and laid down, and you're like, there we go.
The reward for her in that scenario, and I'm big on the idea of pressure and praise. Like it's a balancing thing, and if they do something wrong, they'll receive some pressure. If they do something right, they should receive praise. I think it needs to be clear for them to understand if they're doing the right thing or not. So when in some of those videos, we did it in the same spot. We did it in my kitchen, and I work on my computer there, and the very first time I did it with her, for the first few times I did it with her, it was like 100% focused. I had to watch her because she didn't know any better.
Yeah.
She doesn't know this game. Like, you put her up on this little elevated platform and it's like a launching pad for a puppy. They think it's cool to jump off of it. So as she did that, I knew it was going to happen. So as she did that, I go over and I'm right there to pick her up, put her back on it. And I'd say, nope, put you back. Nope, put you back. Nope, put you back. You do that 3-4 times, and that little bugger, you could see she'd get ready to go to the edge, and then she'd pause. And the second she paused, because she was thinking about it, because she realized every time I jump off of this, that sucker picks me up, tells me no, and puts me back on this. And I'm pretty good with my timing on it. The minute she hesitates, she just told me she learned from those last 3, 4, 5 times. So the second she hesitates and doesn't jump off, I'm just as quick to say good as I was to say nope and put it back. And so then she looks at me and goes, what? Good? Okay. So then she fools around again. She forgets about it. She might jump off. She might be hesitant. But I gauge my reaction based on her behavior. She comes off, no. If she stays up, good. And eventually that little dog gets tired of this. The attention span's short. And usually what ends up happening is they circle around, they check their perimeter, they realize, and that's another part of it, that bed makes the difference for me because it's elevated enough that it's a very black and white thing. You're on it or you're off of it. There's no in between. So it makes my timing, makes it easy for me to have good timing. It makes it easy for them to understand that perimeter. And then that's why I say I think it's one of the easiest things for me to do with a young dog, and I do it with every one of them. I do it right away with them all. But I've done it with, I have a workshop. We did a video with a guy that had a 5-year-old yellow lab that was real high energy. And he told me flat out, he said, you'll never be able to do that with my dog. And okay. So I said, well,
challenge accepted.
I said, bring her here. So he brought her here, and everyone's watching, and I put her on a lead because I physically can't pick that dog up anymore. She's too big. So I put her on a little slip lead. I put her on the bed. I heeled her up onto it. She stepped up onto it, and no fault of her own, she just stepped off. She said, well, I don't want to be up here. And the second she stepped off, I put correction on her with the lead. And she looked at me and she panicked. She thought, what in the hell was that? And so I realized in this video, if you watch it, you'd see it was a little firm. I was a little firm on that correction, probably firmer than I needed to be. And so she froze. She became a statue. So I had to loosen her up a little bit and kind of build her confidence again. So finally she decides she's going to be confident enough. She gets up, she steps off. Well, why wouldn't she? She's never been asked to be on there. The second she stepped off, I corrected again, but it was a lot lighter. And she responded really well. She wagged her tail. She got back up on that bed. We did it about 3 times. And finally the dog circled around and laid down. And I looked at the guy, and the guy looked at me, and he looked like I was doing magic, like I was a wizard of some sort. And I said, look, every dog can do this because it's easy. It's just don't step off. Now I said, but here's the thing. She's not done. Like you can't say, oh, she's
not proof. Yeah.
Because now you'll have to do this going forward all the time, every time. And it'll take a lot longer for you to have a reliable dog on place where, like these dogs, I went to the bathroom before. I'll go down my setter gets a little excited. She wants to know where I'm at. These guys, I don't know that they even know I'm gone. Like they're just, but it takes a while to build up that confidence that you can
leave the room.
And they understand that this is the rules, whether you're there or not. Like that's habit. That when it becomes habit, it's been consistent and repetitious enough to become like all they know. And so when you start with a little one, that they don't know the alternative. When you start with an older one, you got a lot of habit to change, which that habit was, I don't understand this. I have no idea what this little thing is. So I think it's a pretty easy thing.
Well, and I mean, so much of that is like, yeah, we're just talking place training essentially, but the timing of what you're talking about, instead of rewarding for them to come on it, you're rewarding them on their impulse control. Like she wanted to go off. You saw that hesitation, you saw that connection. And so you're connecting the dots. Like, yes, what you just thought right there, I want more of that.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. And it's my purpose with it is different. I don't use it as a reason, and I have no problem with folks that use it for other reasons. It's just, I don't, because I don't think I've ever felt a need to. Like I get a dog to handle differently. Like I'll put a dog up against a fence line, and I'll set white dummies on the side, and I'll make it very easy for them to realize, man, I got to run like 90 degrees. And so I don't necessarily. I've never run into a dog that I couldn't do that with, so I've never had to figure out a different way of doing it.
Right.
But there's, and so there's.
I like how you phrase that. You never had to figure out another way. You're not saying that there isn't other ways or that you may never have to. You just, up till now, you haven't had to.
Right. And I think if you do it the other way, you'll gain. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because I know it works. I've seen it. But what I think it does is it makes this harder. Because it makes it harder to do what I want them to do it depends on what your definition is of place training. My definition of place training is go be on your place and don't come off. Other people's place training or the use of place boards for training accomplishes other objectives.
Yeah.
I don't use them because I think it muddies the waters for this behavior.
Yeah. And I mean, you could train it this way, and then to your point, you take that place board out into the field. It's going to water down what you built into the house because, to your point, it's like when we're training, you have to hit that repetition. Like you have to get enough reps to where it registers with the dog's brain. So if you're constantly getting those reps, and to your point, go on, go off, go on, go off, go on, go off.
It's the opposite. We're asking them to do something different.
Yeah.
Using the same thing. So maybe I don't know if it would make a difference or not. Maybe you could use different boards.
I was just about to ask.
Different type of platform.
You talked about the elevated. Yeah, you said the elevation one. Maybe like I was going to ask if you thought that maybe that would make a difference to where if you just had a flat board or something.
Yeah, might. I just, again, the stuff the reason I don't do it is because I've just never run into a point where I went, boy, I really got to figure out a better way to do this.
Right.
It just hasn't been for me. But.
Well, and we spoke about the difference between your labs are just, they don't even know if you leave the room. Your setter's a little bit more aware of where you're at, but she's still doing the same exact behavior here.
Today, right now, I think is the first time today
she's laid down.
Yeah. She's nesting up with her. And I'm, what I'm really glad about is because I'm not there. What even watching this happen is, for me personally, I like it because she's showing me that's the behavior I like. That's a behavior I would like to see her do. I don't mind if she's standing up because that's in her too. But for her to be able to just relax like that tells me mentally she's either really exhausted, which she probably is, Or she's just come to this point where she's gotten okay with the idea of, hey, he's not like right next to me right now,
That's
me
okay.
personally, and she's cool with it. If she got real fussy and antsy, I wouldn't have been surprised because she really loves me and I love her too. But I also feel like I don't desire that. I want a dog that is
Comfortable.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like nice to be around, not fussy, not whiny. Just
I say all the time, the dogs with the good manners, they get to enjoy more things in life. They
yeah.
get to go to places like this,
They're
and
not
you know, we talk about building it up to where okay, you create this behavior in the house to controlled environment, quiet. You know, would you recommend to the average person to go from quiet home to something as stimulating as like this, or would you say like go to
eventually.
Lowe's or Tractor
Yeah.
Supply first?
Eventually, yeah, I think everything's got to be incremental. You know, like I think it's just, I think you always, and I think that's with everything, not just something like place training. I think it's everything you do in training. I try to make it so sterile to start out with the environment, like as few a distractions as possible, because there's less variables
Yeah.
to make it hard. And then I think but then I think you can't get sucked into thinking that your dog has it if they can do it in that really sterile environment, because as soon as you put them into an environment that's got a little distraction, they won't be able to do it. So and then you're stuck. So I think what a natural progression with everything we do in training should be: start in the simple, easy stuff, add a layer, add a layer, add a layer, and the layer could be distraction. The layer could be more
Difficulty,
complicated.
whatever.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
complicate it somehow. But that's the idea of just incrementally adding to stuff until you feel like you can put them in just about any environment, plug them into it, and they'll perform despite all the outside distractions. That to me, that's a trained dog. They're not trained they're not trained for me to where I want them to be if they can't do it in just about any situation.
Yeah.
Doing it in a teed up spot, like it's a perfect steadying Makina. I'm steadying her up right now to wing and shot because of some field trial stuff that I'm going to try to do with her. That is it's real fresh in my mind right now of when we first started out with it. It had to be in a really as much of a controlled environment as possible. And then, I mean, we're talking about getting a dog steady to birds, flushing, and there's a lot of, you can't do that in your hallway. Like, you know, like it's got to be out in a world of some distraction that's going to be there. But I had to simplify that as basic as I could to accomplish the goal of just don't break, don't move your feet when that bird goes. And then and that was hard to begin with. But then we did it a few times, and there were opportunities to make good corrections. When she made mistakes, there were opportunities to tell her she did it right when it went well. And it was the exact same thing as that dog bed. It's just on a more complicated level. And then she learned from it, and then she got pretty good at it. And so then we went. Then if I set that exact same scenario up day after day after day after day, by the time we did it for a while, it was perfect. Well, she certainly wasn't done. So then, but some people I think would think, well, she's done. Look at that.
Yeah.
So then it was, okay, we'll change something. So typically I would change something. I'd maybe get a little aggressive and I'd make it a little bit too much of a change, and she'd fall flat on her face. And I'd either decide, okay, was it close enough to just repeat it similar to what we just did and be better with my timing, anticipate what was going to go wrong and be ready for that? Or was it make it a little easier? Not quite as easy as last time, but not quite as hard as this time, and get in the middle somewhere and then set it up again. And if she did it but didn't do it perfect, well, we'll do that again. And after a couple of days of that, she's got it. Okay, let's add another thing. Let's add it. So it's been a progression for me with pigeons and launchers, some Johnny House quail, wild birds. And I've jumped back and forth with some of those, and I've been surprised with some of it, pleasantly surprised. I've been pretty surprised at some of it where I was like, God, I just feel like this shouldn't be so hard. But almost always when I really look back on it, I would recognize if we had issues, it usually was nothing to do with that dog. It was usually how I set it up.
Yep.
And if I got better at that and learned from whatever we did the last time and did it a little better the next time, as long as you're moving forward
Yeah.
and as long as we're
Progression.
progressing, and, you know, and I'm a person that preaches it a lot, but sometimes I got to listen to what I'm saying myself. And I caught myself several times throughout this where I was concerned with, why aren't we going well, I got to get something done by a certain time because of this. I got to, and
it's hard not to fall into that.
Totally.
For anybody.
Totally. And every time I did it, it made it really hard to make progress, because it was always in the back of my mind, and that got in the way, I think, of us accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish. So I really had to tell myself, and I continue to have to tell myself, you just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. And if you get where you want to get, whenever you get there is okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's quicker or whether it takes me longer or less time. And when you can get to that point, which is why I like the idea of, and we put such an emphasis on the idea of folks training their own dogs, because I'm not under, I have clients' dogs, but very few of them, and they're all trained like my own, which means I don't have time pressure. I don't have windows. I talk with so many trainers that are friends of mine that do it a more traditional way, where dogs come in for periods of time, and that it is their biggest stress. It's their biggest struggle. It's the biggest thing that it always, when we start talking, it always comes back to. And I go, man, wouldn't it be nice if you just didn't have a deadline?
Yep.
And they just, yes, it would, but I can't do that. And I totally get that and understand it. I don't have that issue.
Yeah.
And most people that train their own dogs don't and shouldn't have that issue.
It'll be like a self-imposed deadline.
Absolutely.
They'll sign up for a test or a trial
Yeah.
before, like, anticipating that, like, oh, here's my game plan. Here's my path forward, my road, the road that we're going to go down, and they just assume that we're going to be there, right? And it very rarely has room for hurdles or hiccups.
Right.
And what do? Instead of canceling or delaying the test or trial to the next season or year, they're going to push forward.
Yeah.
And it is hard. You get caught up into it to where, we want our dogs to be successful. There's a reason why we're out there spending our time, spending our money, spending our attention, learning, and all this other stuff. But we say it, and to your point, I fall in the trap too, is don't go into any training session expecting perfection. Look for improvement. And if you're not looking for something to improve, what are you actually training for, right? Like, I've had some people like, well, I've trained up to this level, I just want them to do it perfect because I know they know how to do it. And it's like, well, that's not technically training in my book. That's just, going out there and throwing a rep out there, right? Like, there's no intention behind it. What is the goal behind it?
Right.
And if you're just going out there trying to have fun with your dog, cool. But then, to me, you shouldn't have really expectations in line with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's, I agree with the idea of, you really have to, and I get mixed up in it myself, where I lose the focus at times of what's the objection, what's the objective, what am I really trying to accomplish with this? Not just to do it.
Yeah.
It's to do it, to do this or to do that, and at times you end up sacrificing some things to gain other things. That's balancing stuff. And so a perfect example of that is, again, with the steadiness of steadying her up. And when I say steadying, people breaking their dogs out, but I don't like using the word break.
Yeah.
Because I think break has a really definite understanding of, what does that mean? Well, you have to break it. How do you break it? What happens when it's broken?
They're talking about
broken. I don't want to broken anything.
It comes from when they talked about, like, you have to break the dog from that behavior, and it's like, now I like the saying, we no longer break dogs, we train dogs.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, that's really what they did, was they just, and that's why also a lot of dogs were washed out, because it's like, you're either, you're getting the dog that you wanted, or you're getting, and they're just saying that dog can't do it, right? And now I think that there's so many trainers out there that have figured out ways to where, like, hey, that dog may not have the drive to take that level of pressure, quote unquote, breaking the dog of that behavior. Now let's go about it at a different angle.
Yeah, and but defined wise, like a broke dog, is a dog that's steady,
Yeah.
So, but I go, I've thought about this an awful lot. I'm actually gonna. I think I'm gonna write it. One of my columns for GunDog is gonna be about it. But when this dawned on me talking with a professional trainer um, in the last 2 years, so since I got Makina. But what I think is interesting is to think about it when you talk about breaking a dog upland, for steadiness. Because I think it refers to, you can refer breaking to a lot of stuff. You can break them off game, break them, breaking horses, about all the, we're all kind of talking about the same idea. I think most people are. But I asked this guy, I said, the way he described breaking the dog, breaking his pointing dog, I asked him, I said, spell that for me. And he goes, what? Spell what? I said, spell what you just said you're going to do to your dog. And he said, what word? I said, break. Because I heard him describe it in a way of brake, put brakes on the dog. And I said, is that what you meant by that? And he goes, well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to put brakes on him. Put the brakes on him.
Okay.
And I go, well, that's a hell of a lot different to me than break. So if you break the dog or you break the dog, depending on how you spell it, makes an awful different. And to me, it makes a difference on your approach.
Yeah.
Because if you're a gladiator going into a ring and you're going to break that guy, you're going to crush him.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to go in and put brakes on a dog, you're going to teach the dog to stop, because that's what you need. You need brakes. So I thought, man, that's a real interesting difference of, it just changed my mind. It changed my feelings about that process, totally dependent on how it was spelled.
Yeah.
So I'm not into broken anything, because if it's broken, you have to fix it. I don't want to fix stuff with my dogs. I'm trying to avoid breaking stuff. So, so that it's semantic, but the idea for me with this whole process of it really was the idea of get her some brakes, put brakes on her when in the face of real temptation, which is that bird. So it's been a this is the kind of stuff that I never would have thought about. That's why I say that setter has taught me more about training, and I've only had her. She turned 2 in November. She's taught me an awful lot about training, because she's forced me to think about things differently. And I think I've become a better retriever trainer because of her, only because I have to think about it differently. And I think there's a lot of that stuff that with her that is a bit of a different approach that probably could be applied towards my labs and any retriever, but you just don't think about it because those are two different dogs and you train them differently and blah 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 blah. Well, the dog is the dog.
Yeah.
And there are some differences, but there's an awful lot of similarities. So, but yeah, it's interesting. The field trial stuff with her. I'm not competitive with dogs. I've never competed with a dog. I ran her as a derby twice last year, and I'm gonna try to run her this year as she's a off age dog, so she has to be a shooting dog this year. Well, guess what? Got to be broke. Got to break her. So, in order to run her as a shooting dog, if I want to, she's got to be pretty reliably steady by a certain date, which is not that far away. And so I have gone back and forth in my mind of like, man, I don't know if she's ready for it. Should I be doing more? Should I be doing less with her? And that's when I have to remind myself and go, how how many people you've told don't let stuff like that dictate your progress? So that's where I got to listen to myself once in a while and go, well, we'll get there when we get there. She's made great progress. She's not where she needs to be quite yet. She's getting close. And I always say we're slowly getting there, because we are. But it's been slow, and part of the reason it's slow is because of the way I train.
Yeah.
I could have done it a lot faster.
But that's what I appreciate about you, and why, we continue to have conversations about this stuff, is you're open and honest about your method and just how you are slower at all of this, pretty much because you go about it a different way and a different outlook.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And what we're talking about on these trials specifically with Makina, we're talking about the cover dog trials, which for those listening that aren't familiar with this, these are wild bird trials
Grouse and woodcock,
on rough grouse. These
Yep.
aren't pen raised birds.
Nope.
And so the difference between the derby and the shooting dog is you do have to have that fully steady dog. And it's interesting because you're not shooting the bird. So, you know, it's like, yeah, it's technically two release, but, you know, it says, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't run one yet. I'm hoping to this year if the timing works out better. But the dog goes, finds a bird, points, you go flush it. Do you shoot a popper?
You guys shoot a blank.
Okay, you shoot a blank, and then the dog's still supposed to stand through the blank.
You gotta stand through it. You gotta stand through the shot, and then you go back to the dog, and then you release the dog. Typically, though, you know, because there's a course. And when I say course, so I'm very new to it. It's really interesting to me. I'm learning so much from it's a great group of people in these cover dogs. And we're a pocket, like it's the Minnesota Grouse Dogs, the Chippewa Valley, and the Moose River. It's 3 clubs that are very unique in that they kind of work together on a lot of stuff. They have their own individual clubs that act independently, but they have realized, I think, the value in working together, both from like a manpower standpoint, but also from like there's a collaboration involved that allows the 3 clubs to get a lot more done in a better way. I would say a better way and an easier way, because it's an awful lot of work. These trials are a huge undertaking. Like it's all volunteer stuff, so it's like it's tough. And these 3 clubs have such a wealth of knowledge in them. And so for me, the value is I learn so much by observing, by talking with, by being involved with. I actually get a little bit of a sense of pride of being able to kind of give back a little bit and be a part of this.
For sure.
It's a huge, the tradition and the history behind it is so great and so rich. And but our little region is kind of unique. And this coming fall actually is I just wrote something up for the group to go on the website, because we were hosting our region through the collaboration of the 3 clubs is hosting the Grand National Grouse Trial, which is the big one. I mean, it's the big one as
Super
far
Bowl.
as and historically it's never been in Wisconsin, and so it's never been further west than Michigan, and so it's made up of the Grand is made up of 3 regions, and the region that we're in is considered Great Lakes region, but it's never gone west of, I think it's Meredith, Michigan is the trial grounds, and we're going to host it this year.
Okay.
And so we've had some meetings, and like the 3 clubs are kind of collaborating to put the committee together to do it, and we really are putting a big effort into it because it's something that's a real honor. I'm a buddy of mine, Chris By, who's the president of the Minnesota Grouse Dog Association. He and I were asked to be the reporters for it, so I'm pretty excited about that. But I got off track there. But like that group of people has great dogs, the type of dogs that I like. It's where she is. Makina is out of Northwoods Bird Dogs, Jerry Coulter's and Jerry and Betts' breedings, and they're really well known for those cover dogs. Not to say that they don't, because she's a line breeding out of a dog named Ridge Creek Cody, which was a horseback, trial dog. So it's not like she doesn't have the capabilities of running those bigger type events, but like I don't do that.
Right.
And I don't really have an interest in it. I hunt her in the woods. So that's the type of trial that's interesting to me. The wild bird aspect is everything for me. Like I'm not, there's nothing against put down birds, liberated birds.
Just
stuff.
doesn't appeal to you.
It's just not my preference. And there is something about knowing that you're running on real wild birds, because I just think that it's the purest. I wish, and to be honest, like the field trial world at one time was all wild birds. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that everywhere in the country now. So we have to, in order to keep doing it, you adjust. But like, it's so pure and so right to me that's a big interest of mine with her.
Yeah. And I mean, something, where I live at, if I compete in a wild bird trial, it doesn't exist where I'm at.
Yeah.
I have to travel up north, and it's tough to take the time, take the money to travel 10 to 12 hours up north to come do a wild bird trial. I want to do one, win or lose, get my butt kicked. I don't care. I want the experience of it. I want to see it. But being able to consistently do that, that's just not in the cards for myself or the average person, right? Besides like a one-off thing. But I think what you're talking about is like, it's okay to have your preference. And, it doesn't have to be, like you said, you prefer the wild bird trials. Other people are in different situations. And it's like, go play the game that you want. But I'm with you to where, while I do NASTRA now, I'm doing UFTA now, like I'm doing different little fun trials and competitions, there's something about the appeal of a wild bird trial that those don't really touch on for me. But that's also because I put such an emphasis on wild bird hunting, that relationship between bird and dog. That's what I'm really after. I want that bond with the dog so that we can go into the woods and chase a wild bird that doesn't have any human scent on it. There's no four-wheeler scent, fill in the blanks. There's a million ways to go about it. And you said the purity factor of it, like that factors into it for me. And that's what appeals to me about it. And it's interesting that, again, you're not really knocking the Penray's bird game, but it's just not your preference. Because you never really got into that in the lab side of the world, right? Like this is your first true competition.
I've never competed with a dog before, and so I feel like with the beauty of one of the things I really enjoy about the cover dog stuff is I really feel like cover dog, and it might be with the other bird dog stuff too, field trials, but like I know for a fact I can speak to the cover dog stuff that it's a test for the dog. It's a test of the dogs. So we're really, now the handler is an important factor because there are some that have a real knack for showing the dog. They show the dog well. They have an understanding of what judges are looking. It's a very subjective game. There's no you don't get points for stuff. Like it is completely, and this is where it is, some would say this is not fair. I think it is the definition of fair because it is a game it is a game that's important, but it is something that it's very driven by, like, different judges will have different preferences. Now there is a standard of like what they want to see in, it's the whole idea is to create dogs for breeding purposes. What dogs are good to breed, and so you're measuring that, judging that, basing things on that. But the best to me, I look at it and I go, just because a dog wins doesn't necessarily mean to me that it's the one I want to breed to. Like the thing about showcasing these dogs and walking these braces is I get to see these dogs work on wild birds, and there might be certain parts. It might not be the winner, quote unquote, or the champion of that particular event, but it might be a runner up, or it might not have even placed, but it's showcased what it is that I'm looking for from a breeding, if I was a breeder. But the thing about the whole the showing of the dog, to me, it's the dog. The dog has to win. Handlers don't win these. And so I think it's really interesting when you talk to people, and I find it in retriever stuff, and this is not a bash on retriever stuff, but like I do think that the best trainers usually win. I think the trainers are real influential in the retriever games. The dog has to have abilities to do these things, but I think most of them do. I think the best trainers usually are they train the dogs the best, and then they win. And I look at it and I go, if you took the trainers out, I'd really like to know, like, if you took all those dogs and you put them in the hands of people that were average dog owners, I'd like to see which ones, how they turn out. Because if, like, I have a dog right now that my labs will never like have credentials of winning stuff because we don't enter into any of that stuff. But like, I've got a dog right now that I 100% intend to breed to. He's line bred out of dogs for a couple generations of ours, but he belongs to my son, and my son is not a trainer. And my son has been around dogs long enough to really get it. But he's not a trainer, and he'll be the first person to admit it. But he's turned that dog into such a fine dog with such little effort, and that dog will hunt with any dog. And people, wow, that's a really. I had that dog at a show, the ATA show it came down for. But like, it's such a fine dog with such little training. That's the type of dog I want to breed. The bird dog stuff is we're looking at the cover dog stuff. We're looking at dogs doing very natural things that we didn't. I can't train her to be a winner. She either is or she isn't in that game. Some of those handlers are so good at being able to understand what the judge has to see in order for the dog to win. And that's the difference. Where I just think that to me, I want to really have, if you're judging stuff on dogs and you're using it for purposes of breeding, whatever the game is, as long as it's like focused on the dog. Jerry Coulter's her breeder, and I had this conversation with him, and I said, Jerry, one of the things that I pick up about you, and this is a while back when we were talking, I said, whenever you talk about, because he's won a lot, he won a hell of a lot of cover dog stuff in the days. He doesn't do it anymore, or hasn't done it for some time, but he's still involved with the clubs and he's doing some judging and stuff. But he's not running dogs, he's not competing dogs, he's campaigning. But he did, and he did it hard, and he's a winner, and he won. Him and Betsy, they won. I always say to him, I never hear you talk about what you won. It's never a conversation of I won this or I won that. I won this, I won that. It's this dog won this dog won that. And I told him that, and I said, that's what I love hearing, is because you're not doing it intentionally. I've just picked up on it. That's how you talk. These dogs win this stuff for you. And he goes, yeah, you want to hear a funny story? I ran against this other guy, and we went, and they ended up, I think it was a callback, and the two of them ran a race together, and the other guy's dog took a step, was picked up. Jerry's dog pointed a bird, handled everything really well, named the winner. So guy says to Jerry as they're walking by, and the guy's not real happy about it with his dog, and the guy looks at Jerry and says, well, I guess you won that one. Jerry said, I turned and looked at him and said, no, the dog won that one. And a lot of that's so simple, and that makes such sense, but listen in the future of how many people you hear talk about what they won.
Yeah.
They didn't win shit. That's like me on Monday morning in Green Bay, because everybody tells me how we did this yesterday and we did that. Not a single person dressed up as a Packer on Sunday, but we in Green Bay are all the Packers.
Yeah.
So like I laugh at that sometimes, and I go, it's the dog. And that is where that cover dog thing, I think, is really accurate. And I think
I think to your point, because there is training that goes into it, right? Like you do have to get the dog fully steady, right?
Yeah, that part of it is.
That part of it is. But I would agree that in the actual trial itself, again, I haven't been there myself, but just loose understanding and picturing it is, you are just letting that dog loose and going on a hunt, right? And so it's up to that dog to, succeed or fail. But you still do have the training aspect, and there is a number. There's a number of ways that you can train these dogs that do impact the enthusiasm and style, right? So
yes,
there are principles that go into the training aspect, to where I get what you're saying on the lab side, to where when you're playing those games, the best trainer that knows the game and all that, like, that is much more handler involved than what you're doing on the cover dog trial. But I would say that, like, if you're Jerry Coulter and you have the knowledge and you have the experience and you know how to progress the dog through that training, I would say that, that he built that dog to be able to perform on Super Bowl Sunday, right? Like, it's semantics again.
I just don't think it's, I think it's like, so the difference is, this is my opinion. People ask me all the time, what's easier for you to train?
Yeah.
Your labs or that setter? Well, I think if you never owned a dog before and you wanted to train your dog to hunt, now, got to remember, what are my objectives? With the bird dog, it's to hunt birds. It's upland. With the labs, it's I'm doing shed hunting with them. I'm tracking with them. I'm doing gun dog stuff with them. I'm doing some of them we're doing flushing. Some of them we're doing upland, but they're just at heel and picking up for me. So there's, if you ask me, if you say which one's easier to train for the specific purpose, upland with the upland dog, with the pointing dog, or let's just say, let's narrow it down to one thing, which would be gun dog, ducks and water, ducks and geese, waterfowl stuff. I would say if you've never had a dog before and you want to know which one's easier to do with no training experience, it's 100% the bird dog.
Absolutely.
Because there is nothing, you got to buy the right one. That's the hardest part. If you buy the right one, if you buy the right bird dog, your job's pretty easy.
You're setting it up and just, you're not even really steering it. It's like you do the right setup at the right time, and the dog will do it for you. Essentially,
if you give them the right opportunities, you'll have a nice bird dog. I can't tell you how many people I know have good bird dogs that they're not much as far as, and they'll say it themselves. I'm not saying it negative about them, but they'll say I'm not much of a trainer.
No.
But now that's the hunting part of it. That setter of mine, I trained with a foundation of obedience, the same as my lab, because does it help with me and does it help us in the field? I certainly don't think it hurts, and I think it helps to a degree. It does, hunting, but it makes it very nice to do this, a show like this. It makes it very nice to have her in the house. It makes it very nice to take her camping. For me personally, I don't have an option with that. They're going to always have to have that, because then to enjoy them as a family dog, all my dogs are family dogs.
It's a companion
dog.
I
got to have that no matter what. So take that aside. Like, I don't think you can not train them at all.
Right.
And for me, I can't not train them at all. But like the bird part of it, it's too formal. The retriever stuff is too formal.
Yeah.
You're asking them to do way too many things that are not natural to them.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. Is like, let's rewind, 6-7 decades back in the day where the average upland hunter had the setter pointer out in the kennel in the backyard that they didn't really do much with during the off season. And when they're puppies, they may expose them up to birds.
Sure.
Put that foundation that you're just talking about. You have to have a little bit of something in them.
Yeah.
And then they just went and hunted, and then they had quality bird dogs. Hunting bird dogs.
Yeah.
And then conversely, the lab guys, the guys that were playing the game, they didn't just go stick their labs or retrievers out in a kennel and only touch them during duck season. It was constant year round. You have to build that machine. Mm-hmm. And it goes to show, like, what you're asking the dog to do, like this over here, the retriever stuff, takes more time, more reps, more manipulation by us. Where with a bird dog, if all you want is a pointer to go hunt, point birds, and you shoot birds, it doesn't take that much to get that level of dog.
Right. And that's where, when you start talking about measuring them in competition, I do think it's a more desirable format for me in that bird dog space versus the retriever stuff, because
just more natural.
Yeah, and to me, that's the purpose. Now, if the purpose is to win stuff, if the purpose is to gain value for monetary purposes of breeding, or collect ribbons, or whatever it is, then I get it. It's different. But like for me, the trial, if you go back and read all the old stuff about the reasoning for trials and the reason they did them in the first place, it really is for integrity of the breed. It's to weed out the best of the best to carry on what you want in that type of dog.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I like that history part of it. And I think it's held pretty true.
But then you have to ask the question, at what point, where's that line that training overshadows genetics? Right.
Right.
Which
is a lot harder. So I feel like that's a lot harder to fluff in the bird dog world. You can't. That dog cannot be trained to run. You can't train a dog to bird find.
Birds.
You can't train a dog to look the way it looks on point, or the way it looks through the woods. A lot of that is impactful on the winner.
Yeah.
The winner has to, if the winner doesn't hold its tail the right way and look the right way as far as intensity on point, he might find more birds, but he doesn't look exactly the way they want him to look. So he's good. He's good at this, but he's not the best at that. And there's like a whole list, and that's the subjectivity of it. There are a lot of judges that have different, and I love listening to as many of them that are willing to say what they like, because, and some people I think it probably bugs, because there are different preferences out there, and there are different ideas of what they should be and shouldn't be. And that's where it's like, there's no perfect dog. There's no, because it kind of depends on where you're running it and who you're running it in front of. And, but like, I look at it and I go but there are some consistent things. And like, what I really like about her is, I don't know that she'll ever win. I don't, if you ask me today, I'll tell you, I don't think she'll win much. She certainly won't win based on power, because she's not a real powerful dog. Where I see some winners, I see some of these dogs that are just so powerful, so athletic, so impressive. Their build is just amazing. But what she does have going for her, and this is, I'm biased, but what she does have going for her is, they describe her as, she's real fancy. She's real
finesse.
She's beautiful to watch. She's so easy on the eye. So what I think, and I've said this from the very beginning, and have I influenced it in her training? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not that good of a trainer. I can't train a bird dog to not be a bird dog. I can't train a bird dog to not run out and find birds. You can put as much obedience in them as you want. You're never going to take that out of them. I don't believe you can. So, but she hunts exactly how I want her to hunt. I don't think I don't want her getting out super far. I don't use collars. I don't even run her with a GPS. I've quit running her with a GPS. I don't even run her on a GPS anymore, because it forces me to really stay connected to her.
Dude, that's really interesting. I've talked about this where I don't do it all the time. I use my tracking collar 99% of the time, especially like on actual hunting and in unfamiliar areas. But I love doing fun runs, or in my backyard, I have this abandoned plant nursery that when the woodcock flights are in, holds a woodcock. I love going out there and simulating a hunt without a tracking collar, because it forces me to pay attention, and I feel like you get to know your dog on a much deeper level, on their behaviors, what their tendencies to do this or go there. Yeah, it's like you're getting in the head of the dog a little bit better. And so like, I go out without a tracking collar or belt. Again, controlled environment, controlled as you can get out in the woods, but I know it's safe. Like, there's no roads, there's no this. And I trust my dogs to, when I recall, they're going to come back. So obviously have that built in. Don't, somebody listen to this, don't just go drop your dog off in the middle and be like, oh, I'm going to go get to know my dog. But I think there's so much value in that right there, to where like, if your only connection with your dog 100% of the time in the woods is through that screen, and you're always able to know where your dog is by looking at that screen or looking at your watch, I think that there's missed opportunities sometime, or I don't know. It's like you're missing out on a connection with that dog, to where it kind of harkens back to, years ago, decades ago, generations ago, where people, they didn't have these screens or tracking collars. They just went out and hunted their dogs. They may have had a bell, but
I think it's a security blanket for a lot of people that doesn't allow me to fully grow as a handler. And I'll never run her without a bell, because she pushes distance that great, that like, I won't find her if I don't. And I find myself becoming real anxious if she doesn't have a bell and she runs off. I know she's probably not that far away, but I have this anxiety inside of me, because I don't know where she is. Where when I hear the bell, I'm with her, and I feel like, so I do love that part. I was real hesitant. I never felt like I'd have a runoff dog. I've got that confidence in her, but that was earned. It takes time, I think, for you to feel that confident in it.
Oh, absolutely.
But I never thought about it. And the only reason a friend of mine who field trials, he's a pro actually, sent me a message. Paul Cook, Alder Fork.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me a message one day, and he said, "Hey, you should check out this guy. He trains without a collar, and been doing it a long time. He's really, really good, and you'd probably be able to learn some things talking with him. And so he said he's the only guy I know of in the circuit or whatever today that runs without a runs out. So in the field trials you can put a GPS collar on him. Can't put a training collar on him, but you could put a GPS on him. You just can't use it. You have to give the
The remote
handheld to the judge, and so and guys will have to sometimes get their handhelds and find their dog because they lost their dog, and sometimes they're on point. They're just so far out they weren't able to find them. Sometimes they run off, but so I don't have that concern with her. I don't think she's not going to do that. But I always had the GPS on her, partially because she was pretty young and I was still developing that confidence. But the other reason was in the back of my head, and this is going to sound stupid, but I thought to myself, this is the game part of it. I thought, if I don't have a GPS on her, will those judges think that she's such a boot-looking dog that I don't need a GPS? I questioned that. I thought about that, so I thought, well, I better put a GPS on her.
And perception matters in a game like of
totally.
subjectivity.
That's part of the game.
Yeah.
So, but when Paul sent me this message, it's a guy in Michigan that does it. He said he's the only guy I know of that runs in a trial without a GPS. So I said, well, I've been thinking, I think I can do it, and I've thought I could do it forever. Why I'm going to do that? Because for me, it's a confidence thing, and if it makes it, again, she's never. So I don't know that she's going to win, and I certainly don't know that she's going. I know she's not going to win because of her dominating power, but I do think what will happen is if she's ever to become a dog in that world that becomes quote unquote winning, it'll be because she finds birds, she handles the birds well. Like that's a really important part of the game, and she's going to look good doing it. She's never, and so now that's maybe not the whole puzzle. That's maybe not all the pieces of it, but she's got a lot of them. And the other thing that I keep thinking is like, I don't know a damn thing about this yet because it's so early. And Jerry Coulter told me a couple things that have always come true. He's quite a mentor. Uh, for me, he's quite a mentor, and he has taught an awful lot in a short period of time to me. But he told me, he said, there's a couple things that I can guarantee you. One is she's going to become more cautious around birds the older she gets. Second one is she's going to run bigger the older she gets. Well, when I was, she turned 2 in November, so she's almost a year and a half. If you went a year back from now, this time last year, if there was 2 things on my mind that I was like, these are kind of not worrying me, but I'm thinking about them, it would be, I wish she'd run a little bit bigger, and I wish she'd be a little more cautious around the birds because she just wasn't quite yet.
Yeah.
And so Jerry said, well, and I didn't prompt that in the conversation. He told me. And so I said, well, Jerry, I wish you'd have told me this a lot earlier because that has been the thing that I've been thinking about now for months. And he goes, yeah, it'll come. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's a battle inside ourselves. We fight ourselves a lot. I do. I fight myself. I go back and forth on stuff. And when it comes to like decision making and what's the next step, and the other thing that I would say that I've realized with that dog in particular is, and I'll get better the next dog because of it, is I just won't be so hesitant to do things with her. I'm always real hesitant to try something new, take the next step, because it's all new to me. It's all foreign, and I don't think I think that's a pretty natural thing. But what I have realized is they're no different, in my opinion, to any other dogs. And I've got the experience more with the retrieving stuff, but they're pretty. They're pretty. They're not fragile. Like, you're not gonna break them.
No.
And sometimes that hesitance and fear in me to do something because I wasn't quite sure, it just held me back from doing it. And then when I finally got the guts to do it, I thought, boy, I should have done this a while ago when I first was thinking about it, but I was just too chicken, So they're pretty resilient, and that's something I'm learning from her, and I think I'll probably get better I'll get better in the future with her on it. I hope I'll definitely get better on the next one.
Yeah. And that's
because of it.
That's all any of us handlers can hope to do is learn from the ones that we have, get better for the next ones. And that's why every single dog should get better, assuming that the genetics and you do your job, finding the right one to begin with, bringing it full circle to where we kind of started on this. But Jeremy, I'm glad we're finally able to connect and do something in person for once.
For sure,
something new that I've been doing with all the guests is to wrap this up. What's something I should have asked you that I didn't? Kind of let you take it to wherever you want to go, and then we can tie this one up.
What should you have asked me that you didn't?
What's this a mental booger that's been you think that just needs to be addressed in the gun dog world, or touched on, or just highlighted reminder?
Well, I'll just sound really boring with it, but like I do think, well, this is gonna just bore everybody. It's just gonna they're gonna oh, not that again. But like being patient.
Yeah.
We don't talk about patience enough. I don't think. I don't think you could. It is boring, and it is something that isn't always. It isn't as exciting to talk about. But I do think that it's the root of a lot of problems is the lack of patience. And I for a long, long time, I would be able to preach that and I'd feel pretty good about it because I practiced what I preached. I have found myself, caught myself being impatient with my progress with this new dog, with this setter. And so I need to listen to it myself. So in order to, you got to kind of get into that mindset. So speaking it is one thing. So slow down. I have to be patient. Now, I just said, I think there's a difference between patience and fear or hesitation to do something. The patience, when I say the patience part of it, I mean like she's just a puppy.
Yeah.
She's just, she's 2.5 years old. And I think that I listened to a podcast, Bruce Menard. He's from Michigan. He's a cover dog guy. And I listened to a podcast that he was on. I really thought it was great. It was some really good stuff I heard him talk about field trials. He was talking a lot about field trials. And when I heard him talk about some of the differences between the pointers and the setters, and it was the ages that I was so tuned into because that's the life I'm living right now with a dog that's a little over 2 I'm on the fence of running her as a cover dog because she's not quite ready and all this. And so he talked about that a little bit, really indirectly, but he mentioned a few things that made such sense, but to hear it from a guy that's with this experience and very successful in this world, and to hear him talk about it, and he was so not concerned because with the age of the dogs, I'll run them. I know they're not probably going to win. They're not ready for that quite yet, but we'll run them and we'll get them experience. And like, for me personally, it's getting myself experience. Like there's the value in running her because I have very little experience, and it's a very different feeling to handle a dog in a trial than it is to take your dog out and train with it. There's a gallery there. There's all sorts of stuff inside of you.
Especially in this, that you're going out there and they're judging.
You literally have judges judging you. Who likes to be judged?
Right.
So this is like in the literal sense. There's judges, but then there's a whole gallery of people watching. And if you're like me, or maybe if you're not like me, but a lot of people have a lot of pride in their dog and they want to show their dog well. So, but
nobody enters the competition to not have a good dog.
They want to show how good their dog is because we're proud of our dogs. So, but Bruce, in that interview, he made some points that made me realize that back to that idea of patience, and just let her develop as she develops and stick with her. Don't give up on her. Don't get frustrated. Just keep moving. And that's that idea of like, just as long as we're making progress. And it's perspective because it's like fitness. It's like a lot of things that you don't see the progress in the short term, but you will recognize it in the bigger chunks. And so as non-productive or we're not changing the way I hoped as quickly as we'd hoped. And then I take a step back and I go, yeah, but back up 3 months ago,
Yeah.
I'd have been thrilled 3 months ago if you told me we were going to be doing this right now. But in the moment, I'm going, why can't we get this next thing? And so in 3 months, and then I sit back and I go, yeah, and I just talked about a 3 month window like it was something. Well, snap your fingers. It's gonna be 3 months.
Yeah.
It goes so fast.
I personally think impatience kind of derives from not trusting the process. It's like we don't, whether it's trust in ourselves,
Yeah.
trust in our approach, trust in the dog, fill in the blank. We're always thinking we're not doing enough. We're not doing it right. We're not doing it fast enough. We're fill in the blank. But if you trust the process, like trust your intuition, trust your dog, trust the approach that you're going, it naturally, it's like, it's okay to slow down and not be rushing all the time. And we have to get this, we have to get that. No, just trust that, kind of what Jerry was telling you. That'll come naturally. Just trust in the genetics, trust in the process, and you're going to get there.
To me, the word is faith. Having faith. Faith is a really interesting thing. Everyone should have some, and I mean it like on all sorts of levels. But that word to me has become more and more important in my life for lots of reasons, dogs and outside of it. But the idea of having faith, they are a true test of it. These dogs are a true test of one's faith, and you can't bullshit them. You can't trick them, and you can't trick yourself when it comes to that. And so the idea of trust, and when you start using words like that, those are the most important things to me when it comes to training. Developing trust, faith, connection. That is a different side of training than the mechanics, and there's a need for both. And I think we get good at the mechanics usually first, and we get experience tweaking that. But then we recognize, like, to go to that next level, to be able to do what you want to do, you got to take that, pick it up, put it in your pocket, and bring it with you. But then you got to start figuring out how to trust them, feel connected with them, have faith in them. They'll have faith. They give it back to you. If you give it to them, you'll see it in them. You know what it is. You know how it is. So I think rabbit hole away, but that word, that boring idea, you have to keep talking about it, because to me it's some of the most important parts.
No matter what, it's the foundation, in my opinion. And no matter what activity it is outside of dogs and everything, no matter what venture, activity, hobby, whatever it is in life, the foundations of anything become boring to whoever participates in it. So I don't think there's a way to, anything to touch on better than that to wrap this up. I enjoyed this. Anybody interested, I'm going to have all Jeremy's links and Dog Bone Hunter and his podcast and all this stuff down in the show notes. So just look down there if you're interested. But again, enjoyed doing this face to face for the
as
first
always.
time.
Yeah, the next couple of days I think are great to be able to, because how many times have we talked?
3 or 4, I think, something.
And so I feel like every time I've talked with you, I've felt more comfortable. You develop relationships, and so, but now when we see each other, when you break bread with each other, when you have a few drinks with each other, like it becomes, it's a process of growing that relationship, and it's easier. And so I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast.
Absolutely, man. I enjoy it every time we get together. And